I've already reviewed Mega Man 2 nearly a year ago. That game, for the most part, is most players' favorite NES Mega Man. Most. Not me. In my book, that honor goes to Mega Man 5. Perhaps it's because the first Mega Man game I've ever played. Who knows? All I know is that I could probably play this game every day and not get bored of it. It's got a few flaws, but I still feel it's one of the strongest games in the series. Let's begin with the story. Obviously, you once again play as Mega Man for the 5th time, and he still looks identical to his original form. In this episode, the robots wreaking havoc around the world are led by Mega Man's brother, Proto Man. So once again, you have to fight 8 different robot masters, obtain their powers, and use them to defeat Proto Man. Or so you think. After Proto Man's castle, you find out that Dr. Wily was framing him by using a doppelganger. Proto Man actually comes in to save the day a few times, but sadly, you don't see him often. The gameplay for the game hasn't really changed much. You still have the same energy meter, stage select, E-tanks, and life power-ups that you had the past 4 games. You still have the ability to slide, something that was created in Mega Man 3. He also retains the Mega Buster, which allows him to charge up his shots. Any robot also comes back to give you random power-ups. The only real new power-up is the M-tank. You can only carry one at a time, and they're pretty rare, but this potentially useful tank is used to completely restore all your weapon energy. In other words, it's a portable ammo cache. Another new feature is an unlockable robot bird named B. In order to earn the right to use it, you need to collect the Mega Man 5 letters scattered around each of the 8 initial stages. If you miss one, don't fret, as you can always replay each stage. Also, there's only 1 letter per stage, and for the most part, each is easily seen. Often, the trouble is just figuring out how to get it. Sometimes it's just using Rush to jump up to it, and other times it's just falling into the right spot. Overall, the gameplay is still as smooth as ever, and the stages help reinforce this. So it's now time to once again go around the horn and talk about each of the 8 initial stages. First up is Stone Man, which takes place in a rock quarry. I remember this as being the very first Mega Man stage I've ever played. Lucky me. You will immediately notice the great level of detail shown in the game, and as always, the graphics look really impressive for the NES. Everything is brightly colored and detailed. While traveling through the level, you'll find a few hidden pathways, just by shooting a couple walls away. Stone Man himself isn't too terribly difficult, which sadly is one of the common complaints I have about this game. It's often too easy. In any case, he just bounces around. He'll jump low, which is still easy to dodge. If he does a higher jump, he'll crash into the ground, rendering him invulnerable. He'll also spawn 3 circling rocks around him, which move forward outward as the attack proceeds. Second is Gravity Man, one of my favorites just due to the stage itself. Mega Man will be fighting in some sort of lab where gravity can be his best friend or worst enemy. Whenever you run over one of those lines, it'll swap the gravity. This is a pretty cool feature for the stage, but remember that if you're upside down and fall through the ceiling, that counts as a death. It's also fun to see the enemies react to the gravity swaps as well. Gravity Man himself doesn't pose too much of a challenge as long as you can get the pattern down. The only way for you to hit him is with the Mega Buster is to wait until gravity be swapped, and then attack him as you're on the same level. You just need to time your shots so they actually hit. He'll shoot at you too, but there's usually enough distance between you and him to avoid the attacks. Third is Crystal Man, which is taking place in what looks to be some sort of diamond mining location. The visuals of this stage are simply superb, as everything seems to be glittering and shiny. You don't slide around any though, so it's not ice. The parts where the crystals are dropping can be a major pain in the ass if you don't know what to do. Basically, show a bit of patience and wait for a pause in the drops, then make the leap then. Or just use the Star Shield to run through quickly. Crystal Man himself can be frustrating. Normally, he'll first leap up and throw out 4 rebounding spheres. It takes a bit of time for them to disappear on their own. Otherwise, they'll vanish when they hit you. With that, Crystal Man will jump at you and occasionally fire a shot. I remember having a hell of a time against him as a kid. Next up is Napalm Man. First off, the palm tree swing in the background looks pretty neat. Other than that, this seems to be taking place in some sort of military bunker, as missiles and indestructible cone heads will be attacking you. The tigers can be a pain too if you're not careful. Napalm Man himself has 2 different attacks. The first one, he'll just fire 3 straight missiles at you. The second, he'll launch 2 bombs at you that explode on impact. The missiles are actually more difficult to dodge than the bombs. Fifth is Gyro Man, which takes place in the clouds. And no, that's not a gyro in the food variety. It's talking about the propeller it uses to attack and fly. The problem with this stage is the constant pits that you'll be seeing. One wrong step and you're a goner. There's also a segment where you're riding an elevator up and need to avoid a ton of spikes. Gyro Man himself is fairly easy as long as you keep moving. He'll throw the gyros at you, either while he's on the ground or flying in the clouds. If he's in the clouds, he'll eventually try to fall on top of you. If you have beat, now's a good time to use him. The robot in the bottom center slot is Starman. Instead of a water stage in Mega Man 5, you get a space stage. Just like water though, in space, Mega Man can jump extremely high. The first part of the stage involves falling meteorites. After that, you have your pretty standard space environment. Starman himself is pretty much a pushover. You may think that he's difficult to hit, but he leaves himself open when he throws a shield at you. The next guy is Wave Man, which is one of my favorite levels of the game. I guess it's supposed to be taking place on a river, because you get to ride a boat later on in the stage. Before this, you need to avoid cracks in the floor that spout out water at you. Also, before getting to the river, you need to ride a few bubbles to the top. Yeah, here's my issue with this. There's spikes here, which obviously will pop the bubbles, but yet on the next screen, the bubbles appear anyway. Where do they come from? Anyway, the boat ride is fun because it's different, but you need to be careful that you don't miss the Mega Man letter in the second half. Wave Man can be frustrating because he'll shoot a water jet at you, pretty randomly, and you can't shoot through it. He'll then launch a spear at you, and then jump at you. He'll then just do this repeatedly until someone dies. Finally, you have Charge Man, which takes place on and in a train. This is pretty cool. When on the train, it feels like you're riding on top of it because it will move in rhythm to an unseen track. When inside, it continues to do this, but changes the graphics so that it feels like you're actually inside the cargo area. When you get to Charge Man, he'll attempt to follow you around. Occasionally, he'll stop and spurt out 3... something. Coal, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, he'll also speed up to run over you. When he does either of these attacks, he's impervious to damage. So that takes care of the main robot masters. I should talk about the weapons, but I'm not going to be getting detailed on them. And why is that? Simply put, the secondary weapons suck. With the Mega Buster's charged shots, it renders most of the weapons useless. Sure, each main boss has a weakness, but when you can charge a shot in a second and deal the same amount of damage, why bother? Also, some weapons are frustratingly difficult to use. Wave Man's ability needs to be fired along the ground, so you can't hit airborne enemies with it. Gravity Man's is fun, but it depletes quickly and you'll need to change to another weapon to replenish it, since enemies aren't actually killed but instead just lifted off the screen. Charge Man's ability comes in the form of a sliding attack, but you need to time it so that you don't take damage at the end of the slide. Don't get me wrong, Gyro Man's propeller attack is pretty useful since you can make it go vertical in a 90-degree turn, but that'd be the only weapon I'd probably use. So yes, there's special weapons, but there's not really much use for them. Well, since I'm not talking about the weaponry, let's move on to Proto Man's castle. Just like in Mega Man 4, Dr. Wily isn't your immediate threat. This time, it's Proto Man, so you get to traverse through his castle to take him down first. It's your standard mix of enemies and obstacles, so it's really nothing that you haven't seen before, especially if you've played any other Mega Man game. Once you manage to get to Proto Man's clone, the real Proto Man comes to save the day again. He seems to do that a lot nowadays. Anyway, Mega Man defeats his clone and then moves on to Dr. Wily's castle. Again, it's nothing you haven't seen before. Dr. Wily can be a bit troublesome, but for his final form, just use beat and the battle will finish up pretty quickly. The graphics are just as impressive as they've always been. This time around, it seems like there's some brighter colors used so it's not so dark looking, but that's not a bad thing. Some stages are particularly noteworthy, such as the boat scene in Wave Man's level. It all just looks amazing. You also have Gravity Man's stage, complete with blinking lights and giant magnets. This is definitely one of the best Mega Man games on the NES if you're grading it on the graphical qualities. Finally, let's move on to the music. It's one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard for an NES game. Every track in this game sounds amazing. Once again, I have to go back to Wave Man's stage. It's just so peaceful sounding that you can't help but smile. At least, that's how I feel when listening to it. Every song in the game just fits the stage perfectly. I don't know how the composer did it, but he did a hell of a job. As for the regular sound effects, once again, it's the same things from previous games. So you might be asking if there's any faults to Mega Man 5. Well, although it's not much, there is one that I've noticed about the game. It's too easy. Enemies seem to drop extra lives like candy, and the robot monsters aren't really that difficult, as all of the patterns are easy to figure out. Crystal Man might give you the hardest challenge due to those rebounding shots, but that's about it. Even Wily isn't really that difficult, and that's in any of his forms. It's a bit disappointing, sure, but I guess that's a good thing in some ways. Since it was the first Mega Man I played, it went easy on me. Yeah, we'll go with that. Mega Man 5 still stands as one of my favorite games in the series. Yeah, I love 2 to death too, but 5 still holds the top spot to me. A great looking game with an amazing soundtrack. The only thing it could have used were some more useful weapons and a bit more of a challenge. Overall though, an extremely satisfying game that I can still play anytime, not be sick of it. Final score? 9 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.